And then you can see the 4 issues of the editions of the APG there. And here's Hitchcock and Cronquist's original vision. So it was before we could do PCR, DNA sequencing, before we really had much in the way of computer power for analyses, and way before anybody was doing using phylogeny and classification. Well, our project, a few points that I'll hit upon. One was, there was extensive archival data in the our herbarium and other regional herbaria that Hitchcock had access to, although he had to access it by going to herbaria and pouring through cabinets. We have done, in the last 20 years or so, extensive collecting in the Northwest because we wanted to better understand diversity, and there's a number of reasons, I don't need to tell you guys, why it's important to continue to collect plants. A big part of this had to do with the digitization of all of those herbaria in the region, and I'll elaborate on that in a little bit. And I would have to say that we've been extraordinarily fortunate in Seattle to have a broad community support, both in terms of talented botanists, illustrators, and volunteers, as well as people eager to invest their riches in our flora. Okay, here's another timeline. This starts when Hitchcock first took his position at the University of Washington. And one of the things I'll point out here is that Hitchcock devoted his life's work to writing the flora of the Pacific Northwest. He retired in 1971. The condensed version was published in 1973. You can see he spent his years basically investing his summers with his students and with classes of students collecting plants. This was the World War II era when gas was rationed and so collecting was minimized. And then, as you'll see in this next, and then I point out Denton and Olmstead, in the past 80 years we've only had 3 curators at the herbarium at the University of Washington. So the 5-volume set was published in here. Cronquist did the composite set, which came first, but then you can see that Hitchcock's collection really tapered off as he worked on the flora. The 5-volume set came out here when Melinda Denton first arrived. She spent the first several years of her tenure collecting plants in the Northwest because she was not from the Northwest and she wanted to get familiar with the flora. But then the rest of her tenure, she basically spent doing her biosystematic research and her students without adding much to the herbarium. And when I arrived in 1996, I said, you know what? We need to be collecting plants again. And so we ramped up. I didn't do it all myself. I'll talk about that in a minute. The collecting to bring collecting back up to the rate that Hitchcock had, the Hitchcock era. Well, our collecting consisted of a variety of means. I'm going to talk about a few projects we've done, but probably the biggest one, something I started the first year I was there, was the Flora project. And some of you may have seen a talk I gave on this a couple of years ago. We take a large group of amateur botanists, amateur and professional botanists, every year out for a week of plant collecting in a different place around the region. And we bale hay. We just got back from collecting in Oregon where we collected something like 650 specimens. In fact, this was our group last week in Oregon. In triplicate, so that we have material to disperse to other herbaria and for exchange material from elsewhere around. That helps us build collections and build our understanding of the diversity in the area. We've done collaborative surveys with national parks, where we've had to hike in under foot power. Actually, we had some helicopter power in the North Cascades one summer. The Pasayten Wilderness, where we went in on horseback. San Juan Island, where we had the generous donation of boats to support our collecting on all the islands in the San Juans, the smaller islands. And then the large element of eastern Washington and much of eastern Oregon and adjacent areas of Idaho and the sagebrush steppe we've hit as well. All of that collecting has been digitized, and through the generous funding of the National Science Foundation. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a little bit when I get to the end, because the National Science Foundation didn't give us a penny for the floristic project itself, and that's typical. But what they did do is provide grants to University of Washington, Washington State University, Oregon State University, University of Montana, University of Idaho, and then a big grant to a consortium that we led for the whole regional herbaria, including, I shouldn't leave out Alaska, although they don't have many holdings for our region covered by the flora. But that gave us excellent idea about what grew here and exactly where it grew. And that enabled us to provide the foundation for a complete flora of the region. One of the things that enabled us to do was draw a boundary about where we wanted the floristic boundaries to lie. This is pretty close to Hitchcock's original boundary, but with all of the digital data we had available, we could go along and say, well, do we want to go one more river valley south or one more mountain range into Montana? And we could see how many more taxa that would add to the flora project. And we made a lot of decisions on what we could do efficiently and competently based on the data we had from all of the digitization projects that had been done in the last 20 years in our region. This gives a little idea about what the what the flora situation is in the Northwest. In the middle, we have Hitchcock and Cronquist. Approximately 50% of the names in the new flora are different from anything in the old flora. Some of them are new species, some of them are revisions, some of them are introduced species, on and on. But of course, the Flora North America is great, but it's not complete and it covers much too wide an area. Jepson Manual is great, but it just covers the very edge of the South. In fact, we don't get into the Siskiyous. That was one of our big debates. Include the Siskiyous or not. It's tremendously diverse. But there is a Flora of Oregon project that is incomplete. It's coming out in volumes. They said, we'll get it, don't worry. Intermountain Flora also impinges on the south end of our range, but mostly we cut off the Intermountain Flora and the California Floristic Project region in the south. New manual of Montana plants that covers part of our region, and it's moderately complete. And then it's pretty complete actually, but it's got some missing coverage. And then Flora BC, which is also getting dated. Well, I mentioned local botanical talent, and this is just a shot of activity in our herbarium one particular afternoon when this was going on. And we can see Peter Zika with the gray beard in the middle, Ben Legler at the far end, who were two of the editors and doing treatments for the volume. I'm blanking the name of the woman in the foreground who was also doing treatments for us for a while. Genevieve Walden, yes, thank you. And then two of our illustrators, Crystal Shen and Natsuko Porcino, which I'll mention in a minute, working here side by side. Crystal, for the Flora, we had approximately 1,500 new illustrations. But what we did is we chose carefully that portion of the plant that we wanted illustrated to illustrate something in the key. We didn't do complete plant illustrations. We did on a few occasions when that was relevant, but usually it was details that we wanted. Crystal did over 1,000 of them. We were the beneficiaries of a biological illustration certificate that's offered at the University of Washington, a full year-long program. And we got 2 or 3 really talented illustrators who were just starting their career and were willing to work for wages that we could afford. Crystal was one of them. She's now somewhere in Eastern Europe, Hungary, I think, working on illustrations for a big monograph. She's making a career of it. Natsuko here did about 400 illustrations for us, and she's now working as a medical lab tech. I told her I'd give her a pitch. She has a degree in botany and art, and she is an outstanding illustrator and would love to do botanical illustrations. So if anybody needs some work done, she'd be happy to work on a contract basis, as large or smaller projects as you have. Okay, the philosophy we went under, we took a modified APG approach. So a few differences, like we accepted the Boraginales working group split of the Boraginales. We consulted with existing treatments. We didn't do any new revisions. We wanted to take the best treatments available and use them. The recent literature and apply what we know about the flora using mostly local talent. Here's some of the differences. We'll highlight a few things in yellow. The first edition of the flora had 129 families. We recognize 159, so there's a significant increase. A lot of these are families that are split, but there's a few new things. Native tax has gone up about 10%, and this is both some new species, but things also that have been split or things that we now know are in the range of our region, but which were not known to Hitchcock and Cronquist. But the big increase is in the exotic or non-native species, a full doubling of the number of species relative to what was known 50 or 60 years ago. Here's a few examples. Amaranthaceae and Chenopodiaceae are now recognized Amaranthaceae and Sarcobactaceae in our flora. Barantunaceae, Hydrophalaceae, you can see how it's broken down. Liliaceae and Scrofulariaceae, of course, have been classic big families that have been broken up. Some of the large genera that have broken up, things like Agropyra and Cryptanthum minulus, Mytellus saxifraga. And last slide will really be about the finances. And this is something that I think is important to recognize. About half of our funding came from grants, agencies, foundations, and so on. Land management agencies were very generous. BLM, Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, state agencies, all use this flora. Their people in the field use this flora, and they were eager to help. But about half of it came from private donations, and including, here's a bar chart showing number of gifts, individuals, and the size of their gifts. So $10 to $100 gifts. We had 100 people who gave in that range, and that really helped. We had one gift of $100,000. Actually, it turned out to be 110 because he gave us another gift later in the sequence. And we started with one gift from a retired farmer who had been in the field 2 summers with Hitchcock before World War II. Wow. And he had been volunteering in the herbarium, and I approached him and said, you know, we really want to redo the Flora. Can you help? And he wrote us a check for $25,000. That got the project. He died just a couple of years ago at the age of 94. He was going in the field with us until he was 92. Okay, so this will be out this fall, and look for it. But you can, if you want it now, pre-order through the UW Press online, and you will get it as soon as it comes out. And of course, we have a lot of supporters and funders. I won't name them all, too numerous. Thank you very much. Question or two?
How much is it?
It's going to be $75, which it's 900 pages. I mean, this is a very modest price, and we work with UW Press. What's that?
And a discount for ordering early?
I don't think there's any discount for ordering early. Yes. Exactly the same format. In fact, we started out by doing scanning and separating all the making digital print recognition of the keys, changing ones as we needed, taking the illustrations that existed and adding ones that we needed and re-aggregating it as we went along.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.